So come on in. I hope you had a great lunch. We will, as you can see, we're going to be doing some more cooking eventually. So I know, at the beginning of the second presentation, we'll talk about that HCl and the Swedish bitters and the digestive enzymes and talk about that a little bit as Dr. Lipski will be talking about that quite a bit. And that will lead up to that. So I have obviously the pleasure of introducing Dr. Liz Lipski, who, along with Dr. Mullen and Dr. Hanaway, have been doing this program for 12 years. And Liz has been involved in functional integrative medicine for the past 30 years. She has been a clinician for many years. She has transitioned. She has taught in a number of different universities. She is currently she is the Director of Academic Development at the and a graduate faculty member at Nutrition and Integrative Health at Maryland University of Integrative Health in Laurel, Maryland. She lives in Portland, Oregon, so she does a lot of her work online, obviously. She also is the author of a number of books, one of which is now, I think, in its 4th or 5th edition, Digestive Wellness. She's written Digestive Wellness for Children. She has really done a wonderful job of really incorporating food as medicine into this program and into all the programs that she teaches. So with that, Dr. Lipski.
Thanks, Dan. I get to talk about food right after lunch when everybody would rather be out swimming or walking or sleeping or something else. I'm really glad to be here with all of you and share some of the practical ways that we implement all of this. And my topic is really remove, replace, replenish. And my focus is really, when we look at this matrix, is to start looking at digestion and absorption. I think about digestion like a sprinkler hose. And the sprinkler hose is kind of this hose of our digestive tract. And the point of it is to get nutrients to every single cell. And if we can't get the nutrients to every cell, then people aren't going to feel good in every possible way, because that's the reason why we eat food in the first place. So I want to, in this presentation and the one that I do after the break, we're going to kind of walk through the stages of digestion and see where it can be broken and also see what we can do to fix it. So I'm going to talk about removing bad foods. I'm going to talk about removing stress a little bit. We're going to talk about replacing with betaine HCl, bitters, digestive enzymes. And I'm going to talk a little bit about cultured and fermented foods and their role in helping with digestive health. So when we start, the very first place we start with digestion is to really look at lifestyle. And that starts with things like, what are you eating in the first place? And I'm going to talk a little bit about what we're eating in general. Our lifestyles, as Patrick and Jerry have already talked about, we live a 21st century lifestyle that is not totally directly normal and conducive to GI health, because we're stressed out, we're not getting enough sleep, we are bombarded with EMFs and chemicals in our food and drugs and all kinds of other things. Patrick's going to talk about fiber tomorrow, and then I'm going to talk about all the rest of these things today. So here we go. Here's the functional medicine tree, and I really like to start with it because the roots of the tree are what hold up the tree. And we have to really look at someone's lifestyle. In my model of the future of medicine, we're going to have physicians who are doing acute care, emergency care with people, and we're going to have health coaches and nurse coaches and nutritionists and dietitians who are going to sit down with people and say, really, how can I hold your hand and what do you need? Because Dr. Michael Stone, who's on faculty with IFM, and some of you probably already know him. Uh-oh, my mic's slipping off my ears, so here we go. So Michael Stone, I asked him one time, I said, well, tell me about, like, when you first got your nutritionist in your office, like, what did you notice? Like, what did the nutritionist add to your practice? And he says, oh my gosh, like in the first week, she started noticing that people had eating disorders. I'd been working with some of these people for 15 years and I never knew. We generally have more time and we can ask people probing questions and kind of ask them different things. I've had clients who I've worked with who I'll say, you know, I don't think you're going to get better while you live in Manhattan. It's too stressful and too toxic for you. Or I don't think you're going to get better while you're in this relationship or while you're in this job. And so, you know, it's really important to start looking at the root cause issues. If somebody is a sufferer of abuse in a relationship, well, all the vitamins and probiotics in the world are not going to fix that. And so, you know, in an acute care visit, you're focusing on what's acute right now, but how often do you really use the timeline and go all the way back and say, well, let me look at all of you as a whole. So that's where we're going. So we're going to start with our food choices. Woo! Dan made that. Cool. We're going to start with food choices. So you probably know that at least in North America, our food choices have changed pretty dramatically. Our type of agriculture has been really different. For example, it used to be that you had a cow and you milked the cow. And now when we get milk, milk comes in from thousands and thousands of cows. It all gets blended, and we, in one bottle of milk, have milk from thousands of cows, which is a much more complex food than milk from one cow. They're from different dairies, they're from different soils, they have been eating different foods. You know, so everything's pretty much different about the way we raise food. And the average diet is really insufficient. And most people are eating about half of their meals out. And people are also eating about 25% of their meals at fast food restaurants. And when you look at the nutrient content of most fast food restaurants, the nutritional content is lower. So we have a lot of problems with how we eat. And as Patrick was talking about, you know, when we have these new to nature molecules, our body doesn't always see them as something that's in harmony with the human physiology. When we look at this USDA table about kind of what are just considered good nutrient levels, these aren't even optimal levels. These are like the daily recommended intakes for different nutrients. You can see that we are insufficient in, oh, that's cool. Does it show on the other one? Oh my goodness, that's so cool. You can see, like, for magnesium, that about 60% of the population is not getting enough magnesium in their diet. And you go, oh, no big deal. That just means like 300 different enzymes in your body won't work right. You know, so you could look at zinc, and we've got about 250 different enzymes that zinc's used for. That's why they're called nutrients. So if somebody's getting suboptimal amounts all the time, by the time they're 30, 40, 50 years old, they've robbed their bank accounts and they're starting to break down. When we look at something like the citric acid cycle, you can see that you need, let me go back for a second. So most of the Bs were doing pretty okay, and vitamin E were doing pretty dismal, vitamin C pretty bad, vitamin A, which I could give a whole lecture just on how great vitamin A is and how common insufficiencies of vitamin A are. We're so afraid of giving people vitamin A supplementation. So when you look at this and you look at like folate, for example, folate, magnesium. Oh, I'm going the wrong way here. Then we look at the citric acid cycle and you go, well, if somebody doesn't have all these nutrients in their diet, are they going to feel great? Are their mitochondria going to work right? Are they going to have the energy they need? And how often do we say ourselves, I'm so tired, right? And how often do our patients say, I'm tired. I can't do all the things I need to do. So maybe it's actually they're not getting what they need in their food. And we also know there's so many research studies showing that the standard Western diet is inflammatory. I once had a group of doctoral students and was teaching an online class, and one of the women said to me, sugar's my nemesis. I'm not going to eat any sugar. Will anybody join me for this 8 weeks and go sugar-free? This is probably 6 or 7 years ago. And I said, okay, great, I'll do it. And then we had almost everybody in the class, and my supervising professor at the university also went sugar-free. And what we noticed in these 8 weeks was people were saying, wow, my energy is so much better. I'm sleeping better. My moods are better. And one woman had migraines for 12 years, and her migraines completely disappeared. That's the power of food, and that's just one food. So if you do a more extensive diet, and in this slide you can see that there's, you see saturated fats, and we've got a lot of people on ketogenic diets, really high saturated fat diets. Ketogenic doesn't have to be really high saturated fat, but we see people like eating tons of coconut oil and tons of butter and cheeses, and we do have a lot of research that shows that contributes to inflammation and dysbiosis. So when people are eating foods that are inflammatory, they go all the way through. This was a paper that I found recently, just published, and they looked at the U.S. packaged foods and beverage supply. And they looked at over 230,000 foods from 46 different manufacturing soft drink companies and 236 packaged food manufacturers. So sometimes I like to buy little tomatoes on the vine and they come in a package. So that's like one of these foods. Or maybe I'll go to Trader Joe's and I'll get some almonds in a package. Well, that's one of these foods. And they did every manufacturer that had more than 0.1% of a market share in some food. So this is a lot of them. And out of a perfect nutrition score of 5, what they determined was that the average nutrition component of the average diet was around 2.7 in terms of nutrient density and how much, the quality of the food. So that's what, 55% of what you would hope it would be. Nobody can run continuously, decade after decade, on getting only 55% of the nutrients that they need. Plus, what they also found was that 70.9% of the foods that they looked at were ultra-processed, stripped of nutrients. So the things that were least stripped were things like eggs, fruits, vegetables, nuts, and legumes. And I would say even with eggs, even though they're not highly processed, there's a difference between the quality of the egg that you get in your neighbor's backyard or at the local farmer's market where somebody had free-range chickens running around and you buy it. There's a really different quality from that egg to the eggs that I can buy for $1.99 a dozen at my local grocery store. And what interests me about that, one time my husband and I have been getting these pasture-raised eggs, and they have these beautiful yolks. And then one time we just got some organic eggs, and he kind of ran out of the pasture eggs for whatever he was making, and he cracked another one. And the difference in the color of the yolks are one was like this pale yellow, and the other was almost this bright orangish color. And you can't tell me it's the same nutrient base. And we don't really have studies on that. So people are eating a lot of ultra-processed foods, and these are new-to-nature foods stripped of vitamins and minerals and not conducive to health. How many of you know who are seeing us virtually and here, how many of you know of Weston Price and his work? Great, I love that. I first got exposed to Dr. Weston Price in about 1980, and I found one of his books in a flea sale. And it was really, and I opened it up, and he was so prescient. He was a dentist, and in the late 1940s and early 1950s, he and his wife traveled the globe and they went to different cultures where people had, my microphone's kind of fallen off my head here. I think I got it back. Okay, I'm good. Thanks, Solomon. Just looking at me like fixed it. So Dr. Price, what he noticed in his dental practice was that over time, that people were getting narrower and narrower jaws, and that orthodonture work was becoming the norm, whereas before people had beautiful teeth and big wide faces and they didn't need braces. So he and his wife traveled all over the globe to many different countries, and what they did was they looked for a village that no road or railroad had come into and people were living on their indigenous foods. And then he looked for another village that was, within a half a day by horse or something, but they had white man's food come into their village because they had a road or they had a railroad that was bringing in this food. And what he noticed was that in every single place that he visited, that the amount of cavities that he found in the people who were eating their local native foods was 1 cavity for 3 people, but in where they had white man's food, that there were 25% of the teeth that had cavities in them. He also noticed change in the shape of people's heads. They were getting narrower, and there was more tooth crowding. He also noticed that in the smaller villages that were isolated, that there was no tuberculosis, probably because they were isolated, and TB was a big deal in the late 1940s and early 50s. And he also noted that there was no juvenile delinquents because they really watched over each other. I remember my kids grew up on Kauai, and I get a phone call one day after school, and it's a woman who's working at one of the local pools, and she said, your son's Arthur, right? And I said, yeah. She goes, Arthur and a couple of his friends snuck into the pool, and they registered as hotel guests. And I said, oh, what do you want to do about this, right? So he was busted before he even came home because we lived in a small town, right? And she knew him from swimming lessons. She was one of the other moms. So, in smaller places, people kind of watch over each other. They take care of each other. It does take a village. And what he found, these are the Maori in New Zealand. These were Maori who had been living in one of these isolated villages. And if you look at their teeth, don't they look beautiful? And their arches are just gorgeous. They just look so healthy. And then here's the modernized Maori who had food come in, white man's food come into their culture. And you can read his books. They're fascinating. He shows families who they had their first couple of kids where there was no white man's food. And then over time, they had like 3 more children, and the subsequent children are less hardy. I did write a paper on traditional foods about 9 years ago, and you see this all over the globe, that when people start eating modern processed foods, that people's health diminishes. On the other hand, this is an epidemiological paper that came out of the UK a couple years ago. And what they demonstrated, they looked at hundreds of thousands of people, And eating at least 7 portions of vegetables, mainly vegetables and some fruits, was linked to a 42% lower cause of death from all causes, a 25% reduction in cancers of all types, and a 31% reduction in strokes and cardiovascular events. Eat your vegetables. Pretty simple message. If you take away one thing from what I tell you, get people eating vegetables and do it yourself. You'll feel better and you'll live longer and reduce all kinds of other problems. So probably you've seen some of this from the next few slides from AFMCP, but those of you who haven't been there, food is information. I can eat the candy on the left side and feel really differently than eating the greens on the right side. They're both really colorful, but they give different information. And there might be a moment, like maybe my grandparents used to always give me jelly beans. So for me, jelly beans might mean love. So I might get really different information from that jelly bean that somebody who thinks, oh, artificial dyes, this is poison, but I'm going to eat it anyway, might be a different kind of reaction in the body based on stress. So we know that nutrition is about, food is medicine, food is connection, food provides information, food is information, and energy. And, some of my favorite times growing up was every Sunday morning, my dad's entire family, his sister and her husband and my great aunt and my dad's cousins and whoever else they dragged in would come and have brunch at our house. And they would sit around the table like yakking away for like 4 hours, solving the world's problems, talking about politics, talking about family. And, that's what I learned about that connection about food. And my mom loved to cook. And so I would follow her around all the time in the kitchen. So when we think about like where's nutrition involved on the matrix, everywhere. And how many of you use a food journal in your practice on a first visit? How many of you use it after a first visit? I would encourage all of you to put a new diet, lifestyle, and you may want to use, this one has sleep on it. You could also put a little place for exercise and just have people fill it in. I have seen food diaries that were fascinating. I worked with this one man who started his day every day on his food diary with coffee and M&Ms. And then his day kind of went the same from there. And then I had another woman, she owned a coffee, cookie, and ice cream company, and that's all she ate. And that's all her son ate, and he had really bad ADHD. So I actually worked with him, and we did an elimination diet, and I said, just go on this, and every Saturday you can eat whatever you want. And he said, okay. He was 12. He's like, I can buy into this. I'll eat your way, and then I can eat whatever I want on Saturday. And the second week, he went to a birthday party, and he had cake and ice cream, and he got so hyperactive that they asked him to go sit in a car until he could calm down. So he's 12. He got it. That's what he needed. He needed to really see it himself, like, this food isn't good for me. And that's what his mom made, and sold. So we do have core food plans that are based on Mediterranean diet, which I'll talk about more later. But, these food plans are where we really want most people to be on. We also have therapeutic plans like the cardiometabolic plan and the MITO plan and the elimination diet that are a little bit like first line kind of interventions. And then we have, and the Renew plan, and then we have kind of advanced, which kind of dive deeper. So for me, when I think about all these different GI diets, I think of them in like a pyramid. And how I think about it is, well, the core food plan is a great diet for somebody who's already eating a standard Western diet, and they eat such crummy quality foods that this is already a huge leap for them. And it might be a little bit hard to get them eating quinoa and avocado, avocado of snacks, to just leap from, what they've been doing. So we also know that the Mediterranean diet reduces breast cancer risk and colon cancer risk and cardiovascular risk and diabetes and pretty much everything that's been studied. The Mediterranean diet is actually really preventive and protective for us. So it's a great place to be, and it's really where I like to see most people, but sometimes we have to dive deeper, as Patrick was saying. And then no matter what the test says, then we remove gluten from their diet, right? Because if somebody with GI issues, you want to start thinking about it. And there are, if somebody has celiac disease, typically what's done is you just remove gluten from their diet. But how much quicker and more effectively would they get better if we used a more comprehensive elimination diet for a little while their gut was healing? And I worked with a woman, a celiac educator, who had celiac disease, and she'd been diagnosed for 12 years. She'd been gluten-free, and she still felt like crud, even though her tissue transglutaminase enzymes were normal. And I said, you know what, let's just try the comprehensive elimination diet. So she went on it, and within a couple weeks, she was starting to feel really so much better. And after a couple months, she was feeling light years better. So the right diet in the right person can move them very, very quickly. And tomorrow I'm going to spend a lot of time talking about diets. We also know from the research is that you can change the gut microbiome with food in 24 hours. That's the great news, but if you don't keep eating, so that's really great if you ate really terribly one day, it's going to bounce right back. But if you eat terribly all the time, in order to actually improve your gut microbiome, you're going to have to actually change the way that you eat on a permanent basis. So this paper is by David et al., and I really like it because it gives you some really good information. They took 9 volunteers, and they placed them on 2 extreme diets for 5 days each with a 2-week washout. So first they put them on a plant-based diet, grains, vegetables, legumes, and then they washed them out, and then a high meat and cheese diet, and egg. So one of the things that interests me about this paper is if we look at person A, you can see, here's the first 5 days, they didn't do anything, then they go on the diet. Whoops! Within 24 hours, their microbiome changes, right? They go off the plant-based diet, whoop! Within 24 hours, their microbiome goes back to where it was. And then when you look at them, that same person on the animal-based diet, what you can see is that they had just the opposite response, that their body didn't particularly respond that well to this diet, or maybe they did. And then you can see in B and C, subjects B and C, what's so interesting is they had exactly the opposite effect. When they went on the plant-based diet, some of their microbes the diversity went down. And then they went on the meat and cheese and egg diet, and their diversity went way up. And you go, oh, interesting. So what does that say? One diet isn't going to work the same in every person. And then when you look at D and E, they're kind of like, doesn't really matter that much what I eat. My microbiome's just going to have this zigzaggy perspective, except in E, I had a slower shift of changes in diversity when I ate the meat animal-based diet. And so you see that each person has really variable responses, but we also have really fast responses. And what David and his group said is, what we found was that increased consumption of fruits and vegetables and higher fiber consumption before the intervention seemed to be associated with high bacterial richness, diversity. Diversity is the key to resiliency. And this finding supports a recently reported link between long-term dietary habits and the structure of the gut microbiome that suggests that we have to change the way we eat long-term. So this isn't, Jeff Bland once called it the girth control method of losing weight, where like you diet for a week and then you start eating again. And, you just need, for change the microbiome, you need to change it permanently. One of my favorite ways of doing this, and in healthy people, this works really great. For somebody on a low FODMAP diet, these foods are totally restricted. We'll talk more about that. But cultured and fermented foods have been eaten all over the world. And they've been eaten all over the world because it wasn't that long ago that nobody had refrigeration. No refrigeration. So what do you do with that crop of cabbages? Well, you make them into sauerkraut, and then you can put that in a cold place, and it'll last longer than maybe a cabbage would. And also, people were smart. They knew that there was something about these foods that made them feel better. I had a client I was working with a long time ago, and she was using Peptamen as her main food and frozen vegetables, and she was just living on that. And I said, let's start doing some bone broth, and let's just add a little bit of sauerkraut juice. And when she would take a little bit of that kraut juice, she goes, wow, I just feel like I'm so perked up. So perked up. So it's like, okay, good. So these foods are everywhere, but they're not really everywhere in American culture. We have yogurt, we have buttermilk, we have cheese. A lot of the cheese is pasteurized, so we lose a lot of the benefits. But, more traditionally made artisan cheeses, we're going to get a lot of good probiotic microbes from those. Most of our pickles and sauerkraut come in jars, and they have sodium benzoate in them, which just totally negates the benefits because it stopped the life. It's a preservative, right? It's the life in these foods that gives us life. We want them to be alive and able to promote health for us. Also, we have probiotics in foods, and Patrick's going to talk a lot more tomorrow about probiotics from supplements and the thinking about probiotics. But I wanted to talk with you a little bit about the benefits of fermentation and the probiotics that we find in food. And it's going to be a quick flash, but I'm also really interested in prebiotics. Anybody know what prebiotics are? Speaking to the choir in a lot of cases. So prebiotics, we used to think were soluble fiber. They're selective components in food that are food for the microbiota. And they have this beautiful relationship with the microbiome, and Patrick will talk about this more tomorrow, in that when we eat blueberries, for example, and the polyphenols in blueberries are prebiotic, when we eat those blueberries, about 95% of the proanthocyanidins and other polyphenols in those blueberries aren't activated, but they get gobbled up by the microbes in the microbiome, and they get transformed so that the blue in those blueberries can be protective of your eyes and can help regulate blood sugar and reduce inflammation and do all the wonderful things they do. So we have this wonderful relationship between these polyphenols, fibers, and even polyunsaturated fatty acids in foods that mesh with our microbiome. So one day I just kind of sat down and I said, well, what if I just kind of look at papers on prebiotic benefits, and I put them on the functional medicine matrix. And I could have done this for several days, but I just took one day to to really look through the paper. And you can see that every node of the IFM matrix is protected. Well, before I said if you eat a lot of vegetables and fruits, you're going to have benefits. Well, a lot of those benefits are from the colors and the fibers in those foods. So what does fermentation of food do? I think one of the most important things that it does is it increases food security globally. Fermentation of food allows people to keep food longer, use it better. The Native Americans used to take their meat and their berries and put them together and dry them and make pemmican. Why? Because then they could eat that pemmican all winter, and they can eat it during times where their hunting wasn't good. So people have done this always. Also, fermenting of foods makes the food more digestible. Like raw cabbage is a lot less digestible than sauerkraut, for example. And then we also are adding all these beneficial microbes and bacteriophages and fungi to our microbiome to help it be more robust. And then these fermentation also produces conjugated linoleic acid and bactericidins, so it has protective effects like conjugated linoleic acid has been used for people to help with weight reduction and reduce inflammation and a lot of other things. Also, the fermentation, it boosts the B vitamin and vitamin K content of the food. So if you have milk and you turn that milk into yogurt, you're going to have a lot of vitamin K and B vitamins that are synthesized by the lactobacilli and the streptococcus bacteria that are used to make the yogurt. So pretty important. And then one of the other things you don't really hear much about is that it enhances mineral absorption when we eat cultured and fermented foods, makes them much more usable to the body. We also have some research on eating fermented foods, demonstrating that it helps to break down everyday toxins like benzene, and also breaks down anti-nutrients like phytates and tannins in food. And then also we have some research on fermentation of food helping with diabetes and atherosclerosis. So I just picked a couple of foods. I have tons of slides like these, but I just picked a couple of foods. Tomorrow, Patrick and I are going to make some cashew coconut kefir or kefir. And kefir is what I've found, personally, I don't do that well with dairy products, but I do pretty well with even dairy kefir, but I don't do well with yogurt. And I found that in my practice, a lot of people who were lactose intolerant could do better with kefir than even yogurt or cheese. And I think it's because typically kefir usually has somewhere between 12 and 15 different microorganisms in it. It's a much more diverse microbial population than yogurt generally is. And what we can see is that it has antimicrobial properties and immune boosting properties. Whenever we culture milk, it starts to break down lactose. So sometimes you'll see lactose-free milk, lactose-free yogurts or other dairy products. We have some good research on it being cancer protective. In Russia, they've used it for just GI stuff, mostly in the stomach, and curing ulcers, and then improve cholesterol and triglyceride levels. And then historically, we don't have proof on this, but historically it's been used for hypertension and allergies and ischemic heart disease. So this is food as medicine. Anybody like kefir? I do. Okay. I like it sour. It's good. One of my favorite foods is kimchi, and I love making kimchi, but it takes too long to make it in the cooking demos. But I love kimchi, and it has all these benefits. It's cancer protective. It helps us be thinner. It's got anti-constipation it helps with motility, as do pretty much all of the fermented foods. It has probiotics in it, and again, it's an antioxidant. It has all these really great benefits for us. And I just read an abstract of a paper that just came out in the last month or so on kimchi breaking down benzene. And anyway, one time when I had my microbiome read, I moved into a new house about 3 years ago, and it was a brand new house, and it wasn't a greenhouse, and it's just been outgassing and outgassing. And I had my, which makes me wiggy, right? Woo. Anyway, so I had my microbiome tested, and there were all kinds of microbes that were breaking down benzene and formaldehyde and things. The person who was examining it for me, Dr. Helen Messier, she's like, "This is so fascinating." I go, "Yeah, I live in a new house, and look what my microbiome's doing for me." And now we know that kimchi can help that happen better. So I found this paper just the other day. It was done in 2016, but people are actually starting to look at cultured and fermented foods, and I picked kimchi because I found this one, and look at the genomic expression, which genes are upregulated and which genes are downregulated. And this is fascinating to me because, we know that food is information. We know that ferments are really important. And as we start looking at this, so this was things that were upregulated and downregulated from kimchi in cardiovascular disease genes. And then they also looked at immune regulation of genes. So again, more demonstration that food really is information. And so eat more kimchi. How many people love kimchi? How many people can't stand kimchi? It's usually a love-hate kind of thing. It's like that cilantro effect, Some people just can't stand it. Other people love it. Kimchi is one of those things. In my household, I'm the lover, and my husband won't touch it. One of my kids likes it when he comes to visit. The other one, when he comes to visit, won't eat it. So anyway. And then I love this paper because this was done with fresh local honey, raw honey. And what they found was that in honey, there were 13 different strains of lactobacilli and bifidobacteria, and that they existed in healthy biofilms in this raw honey. And that when you took a teaspoon of this honey, it had 1 billion colony-forming units of probiotics in it. So what if somebody had a cup of green tea, which is prebiotic, and they put some honey in their green tea? Does that sound like a terrible medicine? Not really, right? They said a spoonful of sugar makes the medicine down, but I think the spoonful of sugar is the medicine because we've been using honey on wounds and wound care centers for a long time, and we also know that honey is really protective against MRSA and vancomycin-resistant microbes. So, there's ancient wisdom in eating real food. So if you want to see more on phytonutrients, you've got the Phytonutrient Spectrum Guide. And when you think phytonutrient, think prebiotic rich. Prebiotic rich. Because we really want to promote all this goodness and diversity of the microbiome. Really, I have 17 minutes? Oh my gosh. Okay. So the next part of digestion I want to talk about is the cephalic phase. And we get ready to digest our food. We get ready to digest our food just thinking about it, right? Oh, tonight I'm going to have X for dinner. Isn't that cool? And our body starts getting ready. You start cooking it, it starts smelling, or you walk into a restaurant and you smell all those smells, and your gastric acid starts getting ready, your pancreas starts getting ready, and we start getting ready to eat the food because digestion has already begun. And a lot of this is modulated by the vagus nerve, And the vagus nerve, also called the wanderer, starts, in our brain and goes all the way down through our abdominal cavity, all the way to controlling bladder tone. But in this case, I wanted to focus on digestion. And so it really helps the whole process of digestion to work so much better. Slows gastric emptying, allowing for accommodation of the food in the stomach, stimulates the release of digestive enzymes and bile, coordinates the gut motility. Really important function. And the vagus nerve is really the main nerve in the parasympathetic nervous system, which is the it's the stop, it's the rest. And the digestive system really requires it. So how many traditions have that you sit and you say grace before you eat? Or that you hold hands with people at your table and take a couple of deep breaths and be grateful for this food? When we stop to relax and take a couple of deep breaths and be in gratitude about what's being given to us on our plate, it changes the way we're able to digest the food. Because digestion works on this vagal nerve function and this parasympathetic. Not the go, 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 I'm just going to eat between patients while I go from room to room. Okay? No, that's not it. Okay? Oh, got to pick up the kids, I'll just eat something in the car. Nope, that doesn't work either. I can just eat standing up in the kitchen, No, none of these things are really what the digestive system really wants. And what we know from, and I think we'll hear a lot more about this, is that, and Patrick had said, is that what we know is that the enteric nervous system, this gut brain, that 10% of the information goes from the gut from the brain to the gut, and 90% goes from the gut to the brain, and that interface is the vagus nerve. And we see vagal nerve dysfunction in a lot of different health issues, cardiovascular, heart failure, hypertension, stroke, immune system function, chronic fatigue syndrome, major depression, post-traumatic stress, ADHD, cognitive disorders, so many things. And how do we enrich the vagus nerve? We have fun and we rest. Those two things. So in mice, at least, taking Bifidobacteria longum helps stimulate nerve function. We also, deep breathing, body-mind techniques, acupuncture, playing an instrument, listening to music, dancing, your food and your nutrients, if they're harmonizing with your body. And Dr. Datis Karazian says, gargle in the shower. Gargle in the shower. That sets the tone for your vagal tone. Sing loudly, gag. I don't think of all these things. Gagging is the one that I would choose first. Really, I don't think so. Strength training, really exercise of any kind, really helps reset it, but especially strength. And coffee enemas, also not first on my list. So what I'd like you all to do is either close your eyes or just kind of put your gaze kind of softly down and start focusing on your breath just for a minute or two. And put your hand on your belly, at least one hand. And as you inhale, feel your belly expand. And feel the breath come up into your lungs. And as you exhale, just let your lungs relax. And notice the rhythm of your breathing with your belly going out as you inhale. And your lungs just letting go. And as you inhale, say to yourself, I am. And as you exhale, say the word calm. Inhale, I am. Exhale, calm. We'll do just another few deep breaths. I am calm. Take 2 more deep breaths. And when you're ready, wiggle your fingers and toes. And stretch a little bit. And open your eyes and come back. So let's just take a minute or two and talk with the people at your table and just say 1 or 2 words, really 1 or 2, not full sentences, but just 1 or 2 words about what you just noticed. Good, bad, indifferent. Go. Is this 11 from? Still have 15. 15. Dan, is this 10 minutes my total time? Oh, okay. Okay, everybody, we got to stop because I am way, way, way late. Okay. So I'm going to let you read the rest of the slides on motility, or I'm going to go through these really fast. I'm just going to cover a couple things, and then Patrick's going to come up, and we're going to cook fast. So anyway, I was thinking this was like just some of my time. Anyway, so motility, Jerry's going to be talking and has talked about motility disorders. They begin with chewing. These white things in our mouth are for chewing. We have a lot of swallowing issues, peristalsis, and something you might not have heard of is a migrating motor complex. And it's kind of like the Zamboni on an ice rink. When nobody's skating on it and nobody's using it, it clears the debris and makes everything perfect. And so this is kind of at night while we're sleeping and, 2 or 3 hours after eating, this migrating motor complex sweeps through and cleans out debris so that we're ready to eat again. And you can read these, and you can read these, and Jerry's going to talk about prokinetics, so I don't have to really talk about them, but my favorite prokinetic is magnesium. And Trufala I really like too. Anyway, and here's some foods that will maintain motility, and here we go. Okay, sorry that was a little quick there, but we're going to do this. So Patrick, what are we going to make?
Hi, I'm home.
Here, have an apron.
Oh, we have our aprons? Great.
Yeah, but we don't have any chef hats, so we're going to just have to do this way.
Well, I thought we were going to make some chicken stock.
Yeah.
And I think we need some ghee to cook with.
We do.
So how about if we start and make the ghee?
Let's do that. I'm going to just turn on our little
Do these people know what ghee is?
here. Ghee's clear. How many of you make ghee at home? Yay! And those of you who are live streaming, let us know too.
So the thing is that you can actually now get pretty good ghees in the store. If you're going to buy ghee, you want it to be organic. If you're going to use butter to cook to make ghee, you want it to be organic because obviously the fats will hold many organotoxins, pesticides, herbicides, etc. So you can get it pretty reasonably, but it's way cheaper to do it yourself. I'm always looking for when the butter's on sale.
Yeah.
And then I just get a bunch of them when they're $1 or $2 off, organic, no salt, butter. And so what we do when, let's see, do we have...
and I usually do 2 pounds. I usually do 2 pounds at a time.
I usually do 2 pounds at a time, and I've got a crock pot, or a ceramic pot that I put it into. Because I just keep it on the counter. So it stays at about 68 degrees, and it's easy to serve and work with. And then I use that as one of my 3 preferential cooking oils. What are your preferential cooking oils?
I use ghee, I use olive oil, I use sunflower oil, sometimes avocado oil.
use ghee, I use avocado oil, and I've begun to use and I'll use coconut oil. Sometimes I'm using an algae oil now as well. Although the you don't cook with olive oil, do you?
I saute.
Saute?
Yeah.
How do you keep the flash point below 300 degrees?
You just do. That's what the Italians have been doing for millennium. So
You got to pay attention. Can't just let it sit on the burner like this.
no.
So one of the things that we're going to find, I've just been playing with this, one of the things we find with the ghee is that what I'm doing when I'm with the ghee, and we don't hear it yet, but I'm primarily using sound as my feedback for when it's ready. You'll hear it come to a boil and it'll start to bubble, and we'll let you hear what that sounds like. And then it stays like that for about 5-7 minutes, and then all of a sudden it'll stop. And what we're doing is we're precipitating all of the milk proteins out of the fat. And so you'll see it bubble up, and then it'll simmer down, and the proteins will fall to the bottom of the pot. And at that point in time, if you just keep it on at that same temperature, then all the milk proteins will burn on the bottom of the pot, and your ghee will get brown and will taste burnt, and you don't really want that. So it's important to get a handle on that right away. So
and just pay attention. So we're going to move on, and when it starts making its bubbly noises, I love ghee. We replaced it entirely in our house from butter. So we're going to make bone broth. Anybody make this at home? So I've had people like time us doing this, and it's always less than 5 minutes, even while we're explaining what we're doing. Beautiful chicken. And usually at home, I make my chicken stock with chicken bones and skin and cartilage that we've already eaten the chicken. So if you start with a whole chicken, then what you want to do is after about 40 minutes of cooking, you want to pull the chicken out, take off all the meat, and then throw all the bones and skin and everything back in. So easy to make. I'm just going to take...
You going to go? You going to chop?
Yeah, I'll do some chop. Whoa, I think we're a little... we're bubbling.
Bubbling, and this is not like my gas stove at home.
No, not like my gas stove either. So for the onion, I'm just going to take... I put about a gallon of water. This pot is way bigger than my pot. It would be submerged. And I'm going to this is a really big onion, so I just used half of it. And then I'm just going to throw in some carrot pieces into, they don't have to be very small, because we're going to cook this stock for a long time. Mm-hmm. You want to do those? Mm-hmm. One of the things I love about bone broths is that they're loaded with glucosamine, chondroitin, minerals. They've got a lot of potassium and calcium in them. And we find them really gut healing. I wish we had good research on bone stocks and healing leaky gut. We don't have the research, but clinically we see it all the time that it's very healing.
So what do you think it's related to the collagens and the bone marrow?
I do.
Yeah, me too.
I do.
Exactly.
So because we've got a lot of calcium and minerals in the bones, you can add a little bit of vinegar or lemon juice to help kind of move that along, so you make it a little bit more acid to help pull more minerals out. Do you want to squeeze this, or?
I'm usually used to that one, but
you're used to what one?
I don't like putting the little stockings over the lemons.
Yeah, I don't either.
It's a little
I don't either.
excessive for us, but
you know what they did? They took all these beautiful herbs and they made a little bundle for us.
That's nice.
So typically I go out in my garden and I just get some parsley, sage, rosemary, and thyme. And now you know why I don't have a singing career. So,
goodness. But we can just drop that right in.
Yeah, so they made a bundle for us. And then I think we'll just put in like a little bit of salt and a little bit of pepper. And then I like to add a bay leaf or two
One of the things I love from cooking with Liz over the past 10 years is that I would say that in times of past, I would always be measuring everything, which, if you're running a laboratory for 10 years, you want to be precise with what you're doing. And she's just like, oh, a little bit of this, a little bit of that. And I actually have a lot more fun in the kitchen now because it's just a little bit of this, a little bit of that.
It is just a little bit of that.
That's all we're working from here.
Yeah.
So we're gonna.
Can you listen
boil that.
to that? So then
Sure.
this is made, and you're gonna put this on the stove and just let it.
You guys hearing
cook.
that? So that's the noise that I'm hearing up here, and it'll be about 3 more minutes. And let's see. You're able to see it? You're seeing it percolate pretty well. Sometimes I will take a slotted spoon and I will remove the froth on the top of it as well and wipe it off. It just gives me less protein precipitating out, but depends on how I'm feeling.
Okay. So this is a mandolin.
All right. So we're gonna pop this in.
We're gonna put that
on the other burner.
Put that on the other burner. We're going to put the lid back on it. And we're going to let it cook. Usually, I do mine in 1 or 2 ways. I usually start them at night before my broth, at night before I go to bed, and then turn it off in the morning. Or I cook it all day and turn it off when I go to bed.
What I do is I just get it going to a boil right away, and then I turn it down to a very low simmer. And so I just keep it going. Usually 8-10 hours, something like that.
Yeah.
Okay, the mandolin.
This is a daikon radish. Beautiful, huh? They're very mellow radishes, and I thought we'd just make some radish miso pickles. How are we doing there on the ghee?
We're doing okay. I'm just kind of getting ready over here.
Okay.
A couple different ways. You want to say more about that, or should I tell them what we're going to do here? Because they're getting ready to go out, and they're going to actually have some of these things.
They are.
There's going to be some. Do we have the muffins out there today, or is that tomorrow?
No, tomorrow we're having ghee and muffins.
Okay.
Today we're having fermented vegetables and some other things. We are just about out of time, though.
Yeah. Do you want to use the mandolin for the ginger, or do you want me to dice that?
The ginger, I thought we would use the microplaner.
Okay.
So ginger, one of the great ways of getting this peel off of it is just taking a spoon and just peeling it off. You lose a lot less than when you use a vegetable peeler. And basically, this is a recipe I just kind of made up. A little bit of ginger, a little bit of radishes, however many you like. And if you don't have a planer, a microplane like this, you can just use your knife and just cut thin strips of daikon. So you're going to stick this daikon.
The last crowd commented on my knife skills, or lack thereof, so I've been working on it.
Oh, good. Last year I thought he was going to chop off his fingers, and I was like, Patrick, what are you doing? So, and this is white miso, mellow white miso, and I'm just going to take about a tablespoon for that much.
You washed your hands, didn't you?
I did.
Okay, just check.
But not since I got up on the stage, but right before I got up on the stage.
Good.
But nobody's going to eat these. Well, they might. You might. So we got a hair from the... It's
not mine.
No. It's a daikon here.
Oh.
It's a daikon here. Anyway, so we got that. Ooh, what's happening there?
It's getting close, right? We can still hear it's percolating pretty loud, but it will probably be in the next minute or so that we begin to see it, and when we'll see it begin to clarify, and thus clarified butter. We can see through it.
So these daikon or any radish, they have a lot of prebiotic fiber in them. And with the miso, you get this really delicious tasting, mellow kind of condiment. And they're just so easy to make. And I would just let them sit like 20 minutes and then eat them.
When you were talking about prebiotics, you didn't really mention, but it's the soluble fiber that is the food for the bacteria that are in the colon. right, and in the small intestine. And so those together, the bacteria and the soluble fiber together, create the short-chain fatty acids that we talk about that are important, that are representative of what's happening metabolically in the gut and dealing with putrefaction. You heard Jerry talk about that earlier.
Yeah, I didn't talk about that because you're going to talk about it tomorrow. So anyway, but we talked about it a little bit, and it's not just that. The ginger, the polyphenols in the ginger are also prebiotic. And you'll hear me say tomorrow, like FODMAP equals prebiotic.
Right.
And so a low FODMAP diet is a low prebiotic diet. And sometimes we need to do that temporarily because people have bacterial overgrowth or something else going on, and we can't give them prebiotics because they just feed the bad microbes and the good ones.
So it's a short-term therapeutic diet, not a long-term diet to be on. So if you add back the FODMAPs and you have bacterial overgrowth that's occurring again, you haven't gotten to the source of what the issue is. I'm still thinking it's about 2 more minutes. It's pretty close. But,
it's pretty close.
Do we need to let them go, or should we just show them the next step?
I think we can show them the next step and then let them go. And so this is what we got.
Let's go for this.
Okay, we got both of these. So we're going to just... At home, I use something a lot smaller than this. Patrick, what do you use? You use
I use a coffee filter, but it's a ceramic one, and it's important that it's ceramic. And I just put a regular paper filter in there. But if you put it through something that is like a plastic coffee filter, the heat of boiling butter is about 550 degrees, and that will melt the plastic, and you'll have a kind of a plastic infused ghee, which is probably good for some indications, but I haven't figured that out yet.
Yeah, I used a little just metal strainer, and I have some plastic strainers, and one time I picked one up without thinking, and it just entirely melted. I mean, it went like that. So this is a hotel size strainer. And basically, we're just going to strain it. And then as the ghee cools, what I brought, and we're not going to take the time to show you, but historically, ghee has been used in Ayurvedic medicine as a carrier of herbs and to put little bits of protein foods in it, and as a way to get somebody who's like not well nourished to be better nourished. So
it's a medicine delivery system. It
is. So once it's cool, you can add some glutamine, you can add some probiotics. I brought some zinc carnosine, and I also brought some colostrum. And you can pretty much put anything that you think of that's appropriate for that person. So I might use
But
these
you'll want
things.
it cooling down. You'll want it to be about 100, 110 degrees before you put those agents in there. It'll still be liquefied, and you can stir them up and blend it. But you don't want to do it while it's 500 degrees.
No, just like room temperature.
Yeah.
Put your finger in it.
Yeah.
Patrick would put a thermometer in it. But, yeah. You could use a thermometer, or you could put your finger and say it's lukewarm, and okay, now I can add these things in. And, I just picked these 4, but there's no magic about them. If you want
was that Sam Moon?
Sam Queen.
Sam Queen.
Sam Queen first gave us this recipe.
Is gut butter. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So it's getting pretty quiet.
It is. So you hear a change in what's going on. It's still got maybe a minute to go, but we're just going to go for it so you guys can have your break.
It's amazing when you listen to it.
You can just do it right through the cheesecloth. It works just fine.
It's crackly, and then all of a sudden it goes shh. Gets really quiet.
And what you'll be able to see from Liz right here, first from the pot, you can see some of the proteins that are still on the bottom of it that have precipitated out, and we see we haven't burned them.
No.
And then you
there's
can see
a little
from here
bit in
some of the proteins that are in the cheesecloth. Are we still? Yeah, you can see them kind of precipitated out there. And so that's a small amount, but like Liz said, I'm usually making 2 pounds of it at a time.
Me too.
And that lasts in our house, It depends. My boys have moved back for a couple weeks, so it goes pretty fast.
Yeah, when they're home, yeah.
But anyways, that's it. Tomorrow we'll be making a couple of other things, but part of the reason why we wanted to show you each of these things is, as Liz said, it's super quick. It's super easy to be able to do this, and it's kind of fun to be in the kitchen. So thanks, everybody.
Cooking is self-love.